"We're alone. It's time to do what must be done," said the Apache woman given to a rancher as a joke. They said it was a joke, though no one remembered laughing when the rancher named Cole Hargrove rode into Clearwater Station to find a proud Apache woman sitting on his wagon, arms tied, chin high, and fury burning in her eyes like a lit match waiting for gunpowder, because the men who hauled her there said she was payment for a debt he didn't even owe, a prank that had crossed the border from ignorance into cruelty. But Cole didn't draw fire first. Instead, he cut the rope binding her wrists, much to the stunned silence of the cowhands who had gathered to watch, and the woman, silent as a wolf in winter, rose without flinching, without thanking him, but with a stare that cut deep enough to have a pulse, and then she walked past him without permission and sat again, this time by choice, on the back of his wagon. Her name, she revealed only after an hour of silence on the dusty ride to San Simon Valley, was Ayana, meaning eternal blossom, though nothing about her felt soft, and the quiet that existed between them felt like 1,000 unspoken words made of sand and scars. Cole's ranch, hidden between twin ridges and the sloping edge of Dry Willow Creek, was a place of dust and ghosts, of horses that trusted no one and land that punished even the kind-hearted, a place where no woman had set foot in 5 years, not since fever took his wife and the drought took his hope. Ayana surveyed it all with a coldness born not from cruelty but survival, and she told him plainly that she didn't care what the white men in town called her, that she wasn't given or owned, and if he wished her gone, she would walk back across the valley on her own feet and never look back. But Cole, worn out from grief and angry at the world on which he still depended, surprised himself by saying she could stay just until she felt her path lay elsewhere, and so began the coiling rope of proximity between two people who were not supposed to meet, much less live alongside each other. She didn't ask for shelter, but occupied the old shed and turned it into a bedroll. Space by night and a weaving station by day, fixing torn lariats and saddlebags, with the quiet hands of someone who had seen cultures clash and bones break, and Cole, who hadn't spoken in full sentences in months, found he did not mind the silence anymore, because sometimes silence is the softest form of trust. One afternoon, Ayana stood between the broken fence and a wounded calf, coaxing it to stand again, and Cole realized he hadn't seen eyes so determined since the last time he looked in the mirror, before he lost everything. That night, wolves approached the livestock, howling at shadows, and Cole reached for his rifle only to see Ayana already outside, bow in hand, eyes glowing in the moonlight like a creature made of earth and spirit. She didn't kill the wolves, only stood her ground until they retreated. And when Cole asked why, she told him, "Killing is not the first tool," and he suddenly felt that the land, even in its cruelty, might teach more than pain if a person stayed long enough to listen. Something shifted. The night a stranger arrived, a drunk cowboy from Clearwater who laughed that the joke was still in progress, and called Ayana Cole's Indian bride, a remark that made Cole's jaw flex but made Ayana sharp as broken flint. She didn't need rescuing, but her hand went to her knife all the same. Cole stepped forward and told the man to leave, voice steadier than a loaded gun. But the drunk spat on the ground and said a rancher with an Apache woman had already crossed the line between sanity and suicide. That night, Ayana asked Cole a question no one else ever had. "Do you regret cutting the rope that bound me?" And Cole, staring at the stars that never judged, said no, not even a little. And that truth scared him more than any threat in the valley ever could. She didn't thank him, but the silence between them grew, comfortable enough to let something unnamed breathe. Danger returned 3 days later in the form of a posse carrying torches. Men who thought they were finishing a joke but were instead lighting the first sparks of war. And as Cole stood shoulder to shoulder with Ayana, rifles loaded and hearts oddly in sync, the rancher realized the story was no longer about what had been done to them, but what they were about to do for themselves, for survival, and for a future neither of them had believed in until now. The firelight turned the night into a breathing monster, flickering across the hard faces of the men who came to take what was not theirs, their laughter broken up by the crackle of torch flames and the dry wind that whispered through dead grass like a dying warning. But Cole Hargrove, steady as the land he worked, stepped in front of his barn and never flinched as Ayana stood beside him with her bow drawn and a gaze like sharpened bone, both of them knowing that whatever happened next would burn the last of their loneliness into smoke or carve their names into the desert's memory. When the first torch hit the fence, Cole didn't waste words. He fired a shot into the air. A warning, a mark of resolve, and the men hesitated. But the drunk cowboy from Clearwater, emboldened by ignorance and liquor, shouted that no rancher had ever won a war standing beside a red woman, and Ayanna answered him not with words but with an arrow that pinned his sleeve to the wagon behind him, missing flesh by an inch yet cutting into his arrogance like truth cuts through lies. Suddenly the fire wasn't just outside, it was inside their rage, their history, their refusal to be broken again by men who'd never planted a seed or buried a brother. Cole wasn't fighting for land anymore, and Ayanna wasn't standing for tribe alone. They were defending the fragile possibility that two people born from different worlds could choose to share the same fire, same fight, same fragile corner of peace. The posse advanced, bullets flashing like lightning in the dry night, and Cole felt time slow as he reloaded again and again, shoulder slamming back from each recoil but never wavering, while Ayanna moved like desert wind, weaving between shadows, using stone and saddle as cover, arrows gliding from her fingers, like silent birds that landed heavy in the chests of men who thought she'd break like pottery. The last of them ran when defeat tasted thicker than smoke, leaving behind horses, guns, and the stench of cowardice. And when the sun finally rose weak and pale, Cole and Ayanna stood in a circle of ash and hoofprints, both breathing hard, neither asking the other for thanks or forgiveness. The ranch was damaged but not gone, like them. In the days that followed, they worked side by side mending fences, burying strangers, and feeding calves too young to understand the cost of survival. And though Cole had always believed loneliness was safer than loss, he started hearing Ayanna humming while she worked. A low, steady melody that didn't quite belong to this land but somehow healed, parts of it anyway, and he caught himself wanting to hear it again each time it stopped. She stayed not because she was needed, but because for once in her life, she chose stillness without feeling trapped, and he offered nothing but space and respect, which turned out to be more of a home than walls or laws ever could be. One night without ceremony, Cole sat beside her under the juniper tree by Dry Willow Creek, hands rough, voice unsure, and said, "They called you a joke when they brought you here, but they didn't know the punchline was them leaving. And you staying?" Ayanna didn't smile, not in the way most did, but her eyes softened like the desert after rain. And she said, "No one stays unless the land agrees." And when he asked what the land had said, she simply placed her hand over the palm he hadn't realized was open and replied, "It said we're done running." The desert didn't bloom that night. No storm broke, no miracle took shape, but a quiet, human truth settled in the dust, one born not of perfect love but of earned trust, of wounds that found their match, and of a joke that outlived the laughter and became a story, whispered between mountains. Cole Hargrove, once a man alone with ghosts, now rode with an Apache woman who wasn't his to own but was his to walk beside. And she, who had once believed the world had no corner left for her spirit to rest, found that sometimes home is not a place or a promise, but a person willing to hold the line with you when the fire comes in the night. And so the tale of the rancher and the woman once mocked as a prank became one more crack in the canyon wall, where history waits to be told, proof that even in the wildest west, the heart sometimes chooses its own tribe, and the land, in all its brutal wisdom,